Chapter 13. The North. The bustling waterfront of Oporto is a world away from the hilltop village of Castelo Rodrigo. Yet there is a common element in the north, that of an identity that is very much not that of Lisbon. Aside from a long-standing rivalry between Oporto and Lisbon, there is a feeling in the north that its concerns are not valued in the capital. The beers certainly compete. Superboc tends to be drunk in the north and Sagres in the south. The most visible rivalry stems from football, with Porto against Sporting Lisbon and Benfica. Within the north, the principal difference is between the oceanic west and the inland east. The former has an Atlantic climate. It is damp and often cloudy. Cloud, mist and drizzle restrict sunlight and thus lessen the growing season. Coming off the sea, the prevailing westerly winds are also salt-laden. Steep slopes lead to a high runoff of water, ensuring that valley bottoms are often affected by rivers and streams in spate. Over the centuries, heavy rainfall has helped wash soil from the uplands. This ensures that they have poor, frequently acidic soils, which lessen their suitability for continuous or intensive cultivation, especially in the absence of fertilizers. Poor soils, however, can also be found in lowland areas, many of which have been affected by erosion. The rain brings much tree growth. It also helps account for a cafe life in Oporto that is frequently indoors, as well as for rural buildings with thick walls designed to keep out the rain. Many are built of granite. In contrast, the northeast is arid. In the rain shadow cast by the mountains of the northwest, Trás-os-Montes, beyond the mountains, in the northeast, is also very hot in the summer, often over 40 degrees Celsius, and cold in the winter. Across much of it, although not in the remote Montesinho National Park, there are relatively few trees, and instead an often sparse cover of vegetation. The grazing is generally not good. Oswald Crawford, British consul in Oporto from 1867 to 1891, noted in his Travels in Portugal, 1875, a country of upland rye fields, vines, chestnuts and cork trees, but showing much bare reddish-yellow soil, a district neither fertile nor picturesque. The weather and the soil are not the sole problems, as much of the north is mountainous, with heights of up to 6,500 feet. This encourages a pattern of the intensive cultivation of small plots, a process seen, for example, in wine growing, and one that was encouraged by the historical division of holdings among sons. These difficulties ensured that the region had a disproportionate share of the emigration of the late 20th century. Indeed, in the 1960s to 1990s, the region lost nearly a third of its population. Abandoned buildings are a common sight. The remoteness of the region encouraged the development of distinctive dialects, notably Portuguese-Spanish Rionores in the border village of Rio de Janeiro, and a distinctive language, Mirandês, in and near the frontier town of Miranda. Officially recognized as a second language in 1998, this is close to the language spoken under Roman rule. The region also has pagan-style traditions, notably fertility ritual-like customs, as well as the Paulitiros, the stock dancers of the Miranda region, who are like English Morris dancers. Port. A key example of the continuing cooperation of Britain and Portugal, port wine reflects the long-standing practice of vine cultivation in the Douro Valley, probably from the Roman period on. Wine from the area became important to Britain as an alternative to that from France, but posed a problem because it was bitter and did not travel well. As a consequence, it is believed that British merchants in the 17th century first added brandy in order to make the wine stronger, sweeter, and therefore a product that travelled well to Britain. The combination of the method with British purchasing power produced a successful wine industry, and one that spread its sales around the British Empire. The legacy in northern Portugal is still impressive, from the vineyards of the Douro region to the port lodges in Oporto, in which port is matured and bottled. Both are a must for tourists to the region. There are several types of port: ruby, tawny and white. Each has a particular character. And then there are the specific vintage and late bottled vintage ports. The history of the region is one of the origins of Portugal, but also of power moving southwards, first to Coimbra and then to Lisbon. The traditional power centres, Braga, Guimarães and Oporto, are the cities where history is most present. Each is impressive and contains striking medieval buildings. The centre of Guimarães became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2001, and the city was European Capital of Culture in 2012. Power takes a number of historical forms. The most prominent are cathedrals, castles and palaces. At the same time, Oporto, European City of Culture in 2001, also presents a very different form of power, that of commerce and youth. Whereas many of the small towns are very quiet in the evenings, that is not the case in Oporto. Visiting the north, the focus for travellers tends to be on alcohol, notably the massed barrels of maturing port that can be seen in the Gaia area on the south bank of the Douro, opposite the centre of Lisbon. Port is drunk in many ways. I have been served it hot with sugar, apples and cinnamon in a riverside bar in the Vineyard region. Given the switchback nature of many of the roads, it is best if the non-drinkers drive. Not well known outside Portugal, the reds of the region are also very impressive. The light Vinho Verde, or green wine, of the coastal lowlands of the Minho are even more delightful when drunk there. The wine should be drunk green, in other words, very young, and sometimes has a greenish tint. There are also distinctive dishes, including tripe in Oporto. The locals are known as triperos. It tastes less awful than elsewhere because served, or disguised, in a spicy mix including beans and sausages. Meat-filled open sandwiches called francesinhas are another of the city's distinctive dishes. Good fresh fish is readily found along the coast, notably sardines. Grilled eels are a winter speciality in the Minho. Tourism focuses on Oporto and the Douro Valley, where once river levels were controlled by dams, tourist cruises began in 1986, and where the Alto Douro wine region has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2001. Many more boats have recently been commissioned, and tourists can cruise in comfort. The granite city, Oporto, has benefited from entry into the European Union and from becoming a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its spacious airport is a good point of entry and is reached by the metro. Partying on the Douro. In 1733, the British in Oporto celebrated the Feast of St. George. Both sexes gathered, dressed in costly gala dress, at a quinta on the banks of the Douro, in view of a large number of vessels adorned with flags, streamers and pennants, which fired repeated volleys of artillery. There were masquerades, trips on the river in little boats with music, dancing and a magnificent meal, to which the consuls of other nations were invited, and this entertainment lasted until 7 o'clock the next day.